How's it going, guys? I am Folkerman, your local brick built historian, with another episode of Brick Built History. Today we are taking a look at the Junkers Ju-88A4. It's a twin-engine bomber of Germany, used in the Luftwaffe, and we have the brick from Brickmania, or the kit from Brickmania. So, without further ado, let's get into the review and then go into the history. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the box. You have Ju-88A4 twin-engine tactical bomber, contains 1005 Lego and brick arms elements, and 2 custom minifigures. An original design by Cody Ocell. And then you have the 3/4 profile shot. And it does not do justice to the scale because it looks a little smaller on here than it really is. You got the manufacturer plate with all the information. Ju-88A4 twin-engine tactical bomber, Cody Ocell, Brickmania kit 2305, 3 out of 5 skill level, all that again. And then of course the monochromatic image in the back. Really, really cool. But what is also really cool is the actual kit. Now, I won't be moving this around too much because, as you can see, the wings here are kind of flimsy. That is probably the biggest complaint I have about this. Other than that, like, it's a beautiful kit, but these wings are kind, like, to get this dihedral going, the wings are a little weak, and you have to, if you move it around too much, like I have been doing, like, it starts to sag here, and you gotta like go in here and like press it together, and you have to do it like while it's up. It's a pain in the butt. So I'm gonna be leaving it on the, like, I'm basically gonna be leaving it like this the entire video because I just don't want to mess with the wings right now. But besides that, let's get into the actual kit. So in the front here, you have the little dome. It's Lego, but usually in the actual vehicle, there'd be a space where the bombardier would look down to drop bombs, but it's Lego. In a scale like this, it would be virtually impossible to do that. So you got the iconic dome here. You have the simulated machine gun right there for the pilot, or what the bombardier would be up here shooting that gun. You got the pilot right here in a easily removable cockpit with the 2 amazing minifigures by Lando. So you got the pilot right here and tail gunner. The tail gunner has a ball turret, which is really cool for being able to display it. Under here, you can kind of see it, but there's what's called a gondola. So it's a really, really cool feature of German bombers is the gondola underneath, and it's off to the side, offset to the right side, because the Germans just love asymmetric bombers. I don't know why, but I'm gonna move it a little more. You have 4 bombs underneath here, as you can see right here. The external bombs, the Junkers would usually have external bombs compared to the internal bombs. There is an internal bomb bay, but it's underneath, and I don't want to pick up the aircraft to show that in fear of breaking it. But there is an internal bomb bay, and the external bombs here are pretty nice. They do move side to side like this, which can be a little annoying, but you know, it's the way that it's mounted. The engines here show off the weird thing with the Ju-88 where it looks like it's a radial engined aircraft, but it's got inverted V12s. I don't know why the Germans go with inverted V12s, but you know, like the Americans and the British, they use radial engines in most of their 2-engine and 4-engine aircraft, but the Germans, no. But the reason it's got this radial engine look is because of the annular radiator that it's in front of the engine and behind the cowling. So it looks like a radial engine, but you can see the exhaust right here on the sides. It's got these forward landing gear, which are big. It's big landing gear. They do fold up, and you have all these landing gear doors to manipulate to close around it. The tail landing gear goes up, and you have some flaps in the back here, and that's really the gist of it. This is a very wide aircraft. I think that's maybe 1.5 feet wingspan on this thing, so it is definitely a big aircraft, but it definitely takes up a lot of space. So if you want a big aircraft that looks cool whenever you have it displayed, this is probably one of the go-tos, because, you know, fighters take up space, but nothing takes up space like a bomber. So Cody did a really good job of building this. Again, the only complaint is this wing dihedral thing right here, because of the constantly having to fix this. But other than that, the only time this happens is if you play with it too much. Like whenever it's over there displaying, it's fine. But whenever you're swishing it around and all that, this will happen. So be aware of that if you have this and want to play with it. But with that said, let's get on to the history. So the Junkers Ju-88 is basically the child of what would be called the Schnellbomber theory. The Schnellbomber is literally fast bomber. A bomber so fast that instead of using guns, it would use speed to run away from the Allied fighters. The thing they didn't anticipate was that within the next couple of years, the fighters will eventually catch up and pass the Ju-88, so of course they have to mount machine guns to it eventually. But in the beginning, this would actually outrun most fighters. So, you know, it wasn't exactly a stupid concept at the time. It was just, you know, eventually technology caught up to it, and yeah, they were like, oh, now we need to arm it. But this would be introduced in 1939. It was designed by Ernst Zindel, Wilhelm Heinrich Evers, and Alfred Gassner as the main designers of the aircraft. There would eventually be 15,183 of these built, with only 2 surviving aircraft in like full survival aircraft. Both of them are in England. So if you're in England, go ahead and check out some Junkers Ju-88s. But the Schnellbomber concept would eventually be dropped whenever they realized you can't really go faster than a fighter. This thing would have a top speed of 290 miles per hour, which in the 30s was pretty good, but in the 40s, not so much. Had a range of just over 1,000 miles, and it could carry 3,100 pounds of bombs internally in the bomb bay, or 6,600 pounds of bombs externally, which is why they went more for the external bomb carrying compared to the internal, because you can carry twice as much outside than you do inside. Not only that, but the fact is that they didn't use this just for bombing, or for conventional bombing, which is going horizontal and just dropping them. This would be used for torpedo bombing, night fighting. It would be used for dive bombing, and a concept called mistletoe, which mistletoe is a very weird thing. where they would take like a BF-109. They would mount the BF-109 on top of a Ju-88, and it would be connected. The throttles and the control surfaces would be connected from the BF-109 to the Ju-88, and the Ju-88 would be filled with explosives. The 109 will find a target, usually a ship. They'll dive down towards it, and then they'll disconnect it with Ju-88 still under its own power, flying towards the ship, and then this thing will disconnect it and fly away. It really wasn't an effective method of bombing because, well, you're losing a couple $100,000 bomber every single time you do this. But the Germans have been messing with guided bombs for a while, like the Fritz X bomb and all that. So this isn't anything new of German innovations, but it was also because they didn't want to do what the Japanese were doing, where they were using kamikaze tactics. The Germans thought about it. They had V1s that with cockpits on them, and it would basically be like a kamikaze plane, but they decided that it really wasn't the Germanic thing to do. So instead they took Ju-88s, filled them with explosives, and launched them towards ships. The other thing that I mentioned was dive bombing. So in the Luftwaffe, you had a man who was named Ernst Udet, and if I get a Stuka, I'll go into it more, but basically Ernst Udet was obsessed with the concept of dive bombing. Basically any bomber that came out needed the ability to dive bomb. So there would actually be dive brakes on these things to be used as a dive bomber, as a heavy dive bomber. The biggest problem really was that the airframe couldn't handle like the Stuka, like what the Stuka could do, because the Stuka goes like basically 90 degrees down. This couldn't handle that, so they basically compromised with a 45-degree angle, but still used the dive brakes for better stability and slow speed and higher angle dives. But basically there'd be dive brakes on here to use as a dive bomber. It would also be used as a torpedo bomber. They would put torpedoes either on in the internal bomb bay or on the external hardpoints. They would also use rocket assist to take off sometimes. They would have like the rockets mounted on the wings here. The biggest problem they found was whenever the flaps were like full down, which they do to take off because it gives you the maximum lift, the rockets would melt the flaps. So that didn't really work, so they had to minimize the maximum weight this thing could really carry so that they don't burn their flaps using rocket assist takeoff. But besides all that, the Ju-88 is really a spectacular plane, really. A lot of German pilots going from like Heinkels to Junkers found that the Junkers was quite pleasant to fly. It's really an interesting plane, despite the fact that it's only a medium-sized twin-engine bomber. Speaking of which, the Germans did make a few 4-engine and even 6-engine bombers. This thing would evolve into what would be known as the Ju-188, and it's basically like a 4-engine or a 6-engine version of this, where it would have these engine nestles going out on bigger wings to go and bomb America, because they were thinking if they can hit America, then America would be more willing to defend their homeland than to go into, say, Africa, which they quickly dismissed whenever they figured out how difficult it would be to cross the Atlantic Ocean and try to bomb them. So, yeah, they really didn't try that too well, and only a few 188s were made, and I think all of them were destroyed. So it's unfortunate, but you know, maybe if you get one of these, you can make your own Ju-188, which would be really cool to see. I won't be doing that because I want to keep my Ju-88 the way it is, unless I get another one, then I'll probably make a Ju-188. But with all that said, this has been a really fun build. Again, as I said, the wings can be a little finicky, so if you do have this, or if you want to buy this, be aware that it only happens whenever you mess around with it too much. So if you're going to display it or barely move it, it's perfectly fine. It's a perfectly fine design. Just a few flaws, which happens. You know, it's the way that things go. So, you know, don't automatically hate it for that. But with that said, this has been a video that someone wanted for a while. I believe Glazed Donuts been asking me like 2 weeks in a row to make this, and yeah. So if you watched any of my old my haul videos and you're like, man, can you do this, or can you have this done? Go ahead and ask. I have a lot of planes, and you know, if you want to see one of these planes built and reviewed and the history done on it, go ahead and say in the comments. And if you've learned something about this aircraft, which by the way, the Ju-88 was also the last plane shot down in Britain during the Battle of Britain. You know, fun facts like that. You know, comment what you've learned. If there's anything you have a question on, like, oh, why do they do this? Why do they do that? I might not know it, but I can look it up for you. If you like the video, hit a like. Subscribe if you want to see more, because there's going to be at least another 80 videos. So, yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. But with that said, I've been Fulkerman, and let's continue to build history.